Joining me now is William Wright from GovConnex, which has been assisting Sky News with our election coverage. William, thanks for your time again. I know a busy weekend. What do you make of the teals? Any hope in any of the remaining seats, do you think?
Yeah, so spot on there. Pittwater and Wallandilly are the best chances at the moment, Tom. The Liberals have sandbagged the crown jewels, basically. They've lost the election, but they've saved the crown jewels. Vaucluse, Manly, North Shore. They've managed to hold off the teal revolution there. Wallandilly's a really interesting one. So this was probably, people were like, well, this is not a traditional blue ribbon Liberal seat. You've got the Southern Highlands, but of course you've also got North in Camden, places like Bargo and Hilltop, which traditionally perform quite well with Conservative candidates. Yet this is coming out as probably the best chance for the Teals to have a victory. Judy Hannon there. You've got a very wide field, and when there's a wide field, the Liberals have not done well in this election. So they've seeped votes to One Nation there, and they've also seeped votes to Labor and the Teal, Judy Hannon. Pittwater, the Liberal, will be safe. So we've seen Rory Amon. He's a local. He's had an increase of about 5% in his vote on what Jason Falinski achieved in the federal election in similar booths. We spoke about that on Saturday night. So Pittwater should be fine, but yeah, it appears that the Liberals have staved off the Teal challenge for now.
Yeah, all right. And the latest margin I actually had for Wallandilly was smaller than the one on the screen, which has just led me to wonder what's popping up there. I still think it's going to end up in the Liberal column. It does sort of beg the question, I guess, when we're talking about the Teals, as to we think we know how the performance is going to be. So the question becomes why. When we look at some of the primary vote in these contests, if you mirrored that primary vote at a federal election, you'd probably see the Teals pick up a couple. So yes, we know donations laws have hurt them compared to federally, but in New South Wales, will they sort of be ruining the system more than anything else? And if they'd had compulsory preferential voting, they might have jagged a seat or two. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, certainly. So that's a really good point. I think we seem to like to say, okay, well, there's no Scott Morrison, the Liberal state government is more progressive, and there's no doubt about that helped, particularly seats like Manly with very strong local MPs like James Griffin. But there are also these structural issues, and when we're dealing with very, very fine margins, that's enough to decide an election. And we look at the donations caps, $3,300. That's nothing. So the Teals do still have a large number of volunteers. We saw that on election day. They were outnumbering Liberal and Labor volunteers in some North Shore booths at about 10-1. So there are still people coming out for them, but there are these barriers. You can't have your Simon Holmes Courts, your very wealthy benefactors donating hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just not allowed here. You also can't spend as much. So that becomes the structural issue in these state elections, as we saw in Victoria.
So we saw what happened in Victoria, no seats. They got very close in Victoria, in particular in Mornington, but no seats. New South Wales, no seats. Is the issue as well momentum for the movement, that even though you were so close there, you know, a few hundred votes change and you can say, look, we're growing at a state level too, because it's such a results-based game, the story just ends up being no seats, and therefore you lose some of that momentum?
Yeah, so fundamentally it's a protest movement, right? So, and it was a protest movement at the federal election. Historically, protest movements very rarely do they have much longevity to them. We saw after the double dissolution election in 2016, One Nation had 4 Senate seats. Within a couple of years, 2 had already quit. Jackie Lambie lasted 1 sitting day with Palmer's party before she resigned. So it's hard to maintain momentum. It's hard to keep party unity. I know they're not a party, but they seem to act as a voting bloc. So the issues that might be important to David Pocock in Queanbeyan are different to what is important to Zali Steggall in Queenscliff. So keeping that unity is difficult. So we'll see if they can hold it through for 2 more years till the federal election. But yeah, certainly different to the other movements. And I'll say this as well, there's also a lot of good people and very competent political strategists involved in this movement. So they will plan for this. They've got good people behind them that will plan to make an impact to the next few elections, but we'll just have to wait and see.
It would seem Queensland would be an uphill battle. We'll wait to see what they might contest there. Is the big issue now just try to hold on to as many seats as possible, and the big question becomes, how much was it down to Scott Morrison?
Yeah, so Queensland's a good point. They've moved from optional to compulsory preferential, so structurally that might help the teals. We saw the Greens pick up 3 seats in Queensland at the federal election. Had teals run in those seats, they were teal-like seats, they may have won. But yeah, for the teals, there is the Scott Morrison factor, but for the Liberals, it's also a conflict for them. There's this... They need to find this elusive synthesis between liberalism and conservatism, and when they get that right, they're a political juggernaut. But if they pick one of them, they seem to not be able to rule a majority. Well, it seems impossible on the electoral map. So while there's challenges for the Teals, there's certainly challenges for the Liberal Party in terms of the direction that they choose to go in if they want to be back in majority government. The good thing for the Liberals at a state level is they've staved off the threat. They need to take back 6 seats to take back government. That's not that much, and they don't have to be defending a split strategy and holding on to North Shore and Manly in 5 years' time, 4 years' time.